face and give voice to what has occurred, unfortunately, in all of our lives. That this isn't just about our loss, but how are we going to turn the stories that you hear today from pain to purpose? So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I'd like to invite Erica now to share your story, Erica, and your message.
Well, my name is Erica West, and I've lost my first son, Larray Seamster, November 11th of 2015, and I just lost my second son, August 22nd of 2020. It's painstaking. Every day is different, but like Kimberly said, the hurt and pain never goes away. It's something that you will never get over, and it's something that I wouldn't want any other family to go through. I'm hoping that this so-called resolution that we have will bound with us, because we need this. Our communities are hurting. Our people are hurting. Our children are hurting. You know, grandparents and great-grandparents are outliving their grandkids. I mean, there's a problem with that. We have to come together as a whole and figure out what we need to do, because this is just too much. No other families need to keep going through this. With summer coming and the warm temperatures and the more dense sunlight, we have to come up with something, or we're going to keep having these meetings. And this is something that we want to do. We want something. We want a change. We need a change. We need a resolution.
Thank you, Erica. Elmer, thank you for being here. Elmer's worked as a community advocate for years and has been instrumental in helping at-risk youth. Elmer, thank you. Please share your story and message with us.
Thank you. My name is Elmer Yarbrough. Born and raised here in Portland. I've been prone to gun violence my entire life. Just recently, on last year, I lost a little cousin due to a shooting here in Gresham. And then in August, two of my nephews were shot. One was murdered and the other one left paralyzed. He's still going to treatment every week to try to, walk again. And so we're fighting that. Our family's been devastated. My nephew that was here from Sacramento, who lost his life, his mother is still dealing with his passing, as birthdays have come around and gone, and he has not been around. My sister's here, struggling to take care of my nephew here. The gun violence here in Portland is at an all-time high. Not only is it at an all-time high, but the rounds that are on the ground are tremendous, in a sense that there's more gun capacity in the magazines. There's more bullets being found at the scenes. We don't have the investigative tools necessary to investigate all of the gun crimes. Fortunately, the young man who shot my nephews, he was arrested in Bend, Oregon, after trying to flee. But the person who killed my little cousin has not been arrested or brought to justice as of yet. And so we need more resources. I thank you that this initiative is being brought forward. I think it'll go a long ways to assisting not only law enforcement, but also community-based organizations and the community as a whole as we move forward to try to make this community better and safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Elmer. So I appreciate everyone sharing their stories. Now I want to open up our conversation, talk about how gun violence impacts people, families, and communities. And Elmer, maybe I'll stick with you. You work with youth at POIC, and so you get to see firsthand, young people. I'm interested in your experience. How does this gun violence in the community? How is it impacting them? What are you seeing working with youth?
I've been working with youth for the last 20 years, POIC, as well as being a youth pastor. I had one young man by the name of Darius Perry, who was actually one of my youth, who was actually murdered out here in Gresham on the New Year's on 187th off of Burnside, not too far from where Kimberly Dixon's son was murdered at 8 years ago. I can remember being being called to Kimberly Dixon's son, Andreas's shooting. I think that was the first time I met Kimberly. And just to see the devastation on her face, losing one of her children, was hurtful. Working with young people, you know, sadly, that one day they may not be here. And so over the years, I have worked with so many young people who are no longer here with us, you know, for whatever reason. And sadly enough, many of them due to gun violence, or if not victims of gun violence, they have actually been the perpetrators and actually have either shot someone or killed someone. So I see both sides of the coin. I see the devastation that's left on the family members who lose their loved ones due to murder, and whose children have been hurt because of gun violence. But I also see the devastation on the perpetrators' families. You know, they have to live with the guilt and knowing that their child, they, you know, though alive, may not see him or even her again because of the decisions that they've made. So I've seen both sides of the coin, and it's devastating all around, especially for the community. And then when something happens, and like Erica and Kimberly, for instance, you know, every time there's a shooting now, you know, they're always going to think in the back of their mind, you know, I lost my baby, or I lost my children, you know, and that's what we live with daily in the community is trauma. It's trauma that won't go away. We feel it all the time. We brace ourselves for it when it happens, and it hurts. It hurts every day.
Thanks, Elmer. Kimberly, why don't I turn to you? You chair a group called Enough is Enough, and you work to support community and families going through this. How do you see the impact of this gun violence in community, and what do you think? What's your experience?
So let's move it to where Pastor Yarbrough where he took us. You know, we say very loosely gun violence so easily. We say gang violence so easily. At the end of the day, what we are talking about is murder. At the end of the day, we are talking about loss of life. And specifically, when we're speaking of youth, we're talking about loss of life outside of life's cycle. We all understand going from a baby and growing up to being a teenager and doing some crazy things. And then you go off and maybe you do trade school, maybe you go to work, maybe you travel, but that's interrupted. All of what we consider normal activity for a young person becomes interrupted. And there aren't enough books, there's not enough literature, there's not enough grief material to cover what does it mean to lose a child. There just isn't, because even our thinking, your nerve endings are still looking for that child and the completion of their cycle of growing up, possibly getting married, possibly having children of their own. Those nerve endings are still seeking that because that's part of the expected life cycle, is to live a full life, make mistakes along the way, but live a full life. And these lives are interrupted. So I want to not just homogenize a word or get so stuck in the phrase of gun violence. These are lives that are taken. They're gone too soon. They have not completed their full life cycle. And what does that impact look like? When they say the phrase, well, men don't cry. As a member with some wonderful people of the crisis response team, when I've gone to homicide, shootings, and I see families and I see neighbors, grown men cry, young men cry. That's a sign and a signal of the very real pain and hurt that is associated with the loss that has just occurred and the loss that's going to be felt for years to come. It doesn't end that night or that day. It continues on. Grief is an ongoing. It is something that you learn to live with. That's part of the very real impact. And we are having this impact at much younger ages, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, knowing and understanding going to funerals. I didn't go to a funeral until I was an adult. And now we have young people that are in constant attendance. We have to see that there is a psychological effect. We have to see that we have a physical effect, an emotional effect, and a psychological effect. Those are the very real impacts. And therefore, those are the very real types of things that need to be supported as well.
Thank you, Kimberly. Such a powerful metaphor and visualization. Erica, I want to turn to you. I think, we're hearing, and thank you again. I said this to you when we first met about, you talking about this, all three of you talking about your experience as a gift to those of us. And I know that it impacts you, but this is important for you to get your message out. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts for us as we at the policy level talk about what can be done from your perspective. What needs to be done right now and in the long term to help us improve our response so that we can have less people dying in our streets? What are the things that you see that are necessary?
Well, I would say they always say it starts at home, but home is sometimes a good place. These kids just need more structure. And I'm not going to even say kids because it's all ages out here, like Kimberly said. I don't have an answer or a solution, but I am just one of those hurting moms. Like Kimberly said, I'm not even over my first death of my first son. And here I am 8 months later, still in the same position. Two empty spots at the dinner table. Like Elmer said, Christmas, here comes Mother's Day again. I've already been 5 years with Mother's Day. Here I am, a fresh mother again. I just want a change. I don't want to go to any more funerals. I'm tired of vigils. I'm tired of the crying. I'm tired of the anxiety. It hurts both families. It hurts both sides. Like Elmer said, not just the person that's hurt, but both families are affected by this. So we need to do something as a community. I don't know what it is, but we have to do something, or I don't know. I'm at a loss of words because of my hurt and my pain. And no one can ever know what I'm going through. And I know what everybody else is going through, but double time for me, I need answers. We need people out here on the streets. We need to be back in compliance with how we feel about police officers. I mean, we need people, we need services. We need something right now, today, not tomorrow, not next week. We need something today.
Thank you, Erica. Elmer, I'm going to follow up with you on that question. As somebody who's worked with youth for a long time, what are the things that you see are going to be critical to changing the trajectory that we're experiencing in our community right now?
There needs to be more community outreach. I believe that people who are work well in the community need to be funded to assist in interrupting the interrupters. I think Kimberly said it best when she said one's lives are interrupted, but what are we going to do to interrupt those who cause the interruption for so many people? And so we need some resources, I believe, to start off with young people in middle schools to do some deterrence, to do some education, to work with young people impacted at a young age by what Erica said. A lot of young people, or was it Kimberly, one of them said something about young people being at funeral services at such a young age, and they're experiencing this trauma. So what can we do as a community to go in and have those conversations with these young people and work with them and their parents, to work on some healing so that, number one, they won't follow in the footsteps of so many people that they see leaving here, but not following the footsteps of the people perpetrating, the shootings and things like that. So I think there needs to be more school-based teaching and learning, more resources in the schools, more resources in the homes of those that are impacted. I believe that a lot of organizations who are actually doing the work probably need to be better funded so that we can have more boots on the ground, per se, if you allow me to use that term, to get people out knocking on doors and working with the communities that are impacted in the area, speaking with the neighbors of the people, where the shootings take place, knocking on doors. What can we do to help make your community safer and empower the community to be able to step forward and have an actual voice in making sure that, they know that they can have a voice and can be heard and understood, that this impacts everyone, not just, a certain race or a certain group, but it impacts the whole city and the county. And so hopefully we can move in that area with the right resources.
What I love about that, Elmer, is not only is that your experience and your wisdom that you're sharing, but it's backed up by research. We know that works. It's been studied. And so doing that community work and the things that you talked about have been proven to drive down violence in our communities. So you're right on. Kimberly, I'll kind of toss that one to you and maybe widen it out too. If you could talk about the community piece that Elmer mentioned, but also what is the role as you see it, the law enforcement? I mean, we have a role in this, in that crimes are committed. How do you see the law enforcement role as being, a complementary piece to the broader effort?
So when I think of what we all collectively experienced 2020, so that means we all, nationwide and worldwide, we experienced the pandemic together. What did we see happen? We saw an immeasurable amount of resources literally airdropped into community, specifically here in Oregon. We saw innovative ways by which those resources came about. So when I think of the violence and that the fact that we're at a critical mass place with the violence that is happening here in our region, I'm looking for that type of response. And I can see that we can do that. And so I believe that part of the role of law enforcement is to have resources within law enforcement to be able to actually do what needs to be done. We need to have investigations that are done in an efficient and complete way. And if you don't have the manpower and a connected manpower to do so, then we're going to lose things through a net. We're going to have some very large holes in our net, which does what? It leaves families who are still waiting to have some sort of adjudication process happen because nobody's been arrested yet. Because why? The investigation can only go so far. Because why? Our investigators are overloaded. I think that's real. I think that's really happening. And why do I think that? Because I've seen it already. I've already seen it. I've already experienced it. Not a year, but years of going through and waiting. That's one of the things that we can do. Another part of airdropping resources, and to Ms. Erica's point and to Pastor Yarborough's point, is when we fund, we need to fund who is doing the work. Who is doing the work? We have community-based organizations that are doing the work, that are connecting with citizens, that are connecting with community, that are already connected. They don't have to invent a wheel. They're already doing the work. But we have historically defunded things that were in place. And let me also add to this. I also want to change the narrative a little bit from we need to be fixed. My communities don't need to be fixed. My Black and Brown communities don't need to be fixed. What they need to be is supported in an equitable way, because some of the very things that should be airdropped are already in existence in other communities. And it is like breathing there, whether it's tennis courts, basketball courts, access to after school, before school events, fully equipped, locker rooms that are decked out with TVs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say that we don't have a money problem, we have a distribution problem. My community, we're resilient, we're amazing, we are strong. However, we have not been equitably supported. not in any of our resources. And that's part of what needs to change, what can change.
Yeah, Kimberly, thank you. You said something as we were preparing for this the other day that is, I've repeated back to other people and attributed to you, which is, you know, when people are going through the criminal justice system and getting sentenced, we don't say, well, how much is that jail cell going to cost? Do we have enough money for that prison bed? No, we say, absolutely, the check's written, we send as many people as we need. But when it comes to after school programs, we say, oh, it's just not in the budget this year. Oh, that basketball court, I know it's cracked and everything, but we wish we could do something, we just can't. And, you know, that really stuck with me. You know, where are our priorities and what are we funding? And I think you're totally right. You know, I think we need to recognize that investments need to be made equitably to lift up and to support communities and because we're willing to spend the money in other ways. So let's spend it the right way. So that was, thank you for, again, sharing that. You know, Erica, I'm going to go back to you on this. You know, how do you see, building off what Kimberly's talking about and, you know, resilience in the community, how do we lift that up, actualize that? And, you know, again, if you could speak to a role that you see for law enforcement. As I'm the district attorney, I want to hear from your perspective on that.
Well, as far as the communities, I'm out here in East Portland, and I can see the changes that have been occurring with over the last 20 years. I mean, everyone can see that shootings are an all-time high out here in Hazelwood, in Centennial, and school districts out here. And we need help out here in East County also. You know, we're struggling out here. You know, where my son was hurt at, I've been talking to the community there. I've been talking to the neighbors, keeping a close, I do my own footwork with the community that my son was hurt in. I go door to door and say, hey, I've introduced myself. My son was hurt here. I show my face. I let them know that I am a part of this community. And I feel their pain with these things going on in their front door. Because if it happened at my front door, I wouldn't want it. Law enforcement, we need better, I don't know, we need better trust. I mean, we have an issue with this, but at the same time, I need these officers and these resources to solve my son's crimes. Without these resources, how do crimes get solved? I don't have one murder, I have two. So those are my very strong points of having someone to come in to do the detective work, to go on the leads, to take up the leads, to take everything that they've heard and put it together and do something with it and not just sit on it. And when we call and ask for answers, just give a call back and say, hey, we're working on it, we're doing it. We just want our voices to be heard too, and know that when a life is taken, it's also the family's life taken, but we are speaking for our loved ones.
And Mike, if I could just add on to that as well, when we're talking about law enforcement and investigations, we're talking about having enough boots on the ground, right? We're talking also about having officers who want to come to work, whose morale is in such a place that they can cognitively do their job and do their job well. That is extremely important. And we need to fortify that as well. We need to acknowledge that law enforcement and you as part of the justice system, you're a person too. We have to also have clear expectations. We need to know exactly what do our boots on the ground officers do? What do detectives do? What does it, and how does that correlate to your office? Because it is my guess that if there hasn't been a solid investigation, that means that when you and the deputy DAs come forward to try a case, if you don't have good, solid evidence, there could be loopholes, which could have a case literally disintegrate. And so I wanted to just make sure that we definitely hit that point as well.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, I mean, as all of us have been impacted by this, you know, my office, we send out deputies to the scene when especially homicides happen. You know, we're at the autopsy the next day. We're working with, through our victims advocates, we're working with the victims and the families. And the numbers of cases right now are just so high. We're stretched thin just like everybody else. And you're absolutely right. Without an investigation that gets all the evidence, talks to all the witnesses, make sure that we do everything the right way constitutionally, get warrants, respect people's constitutional rights, but collect evidence appropriately. Those cases are either not prosecutable or they could be put at jeopardy, which is one of the reasons why I'm supporting this task force approach of the multi-jurisdictional task force of working with the sheriff's office, PPB, Gresham Police, ATF, and FBI, all of us pulling in the same direction as law enforcement to do the investigative work that's necessary to make the cases. So thank you so much for bringing that up. It's absolutely crucial. If there's going to be accountability and interruption of the behavior, we need to have those investigations done appropriately. And I wanted to point out that we had put up a kind of map of the county, and we showed the areas where the gun violence had hit the hardest. And so, Elmer, I want to turn to you on this. We see which parts of our county have been really hit hard in the east and the southeast. I overlaid that data with data that I saw from Commissioner Lori Stegman's office that showed the most marginal economy places in our county. She has a great dashboard that shows the zip codes and the census tracts that have the lowest incomes. And I swear, if you lay the gun violence on top of her map of the most marginalized economically, boy, they're almost a perfect fit. What do you draw from that, Elmer? What's your experience?
It's been my experience that oftentimes hurt people. And so when you have a community that is hurting, though resilient, we still have some struggles that we need to work through. I, like Erica, I live in East County. If I walk out my door and 2 minutes away from where I live at is where Kimberly's son was murdered. And so I'm aware, I hear the gunshots, I hear the violence, I hear the sirens. And so I live in an area where it's predominantly low income and where people live that are actually struggling. And so people are actually struggling, they have children that are struggling as well and living these lives. And without the proper resources and the community-based organizations and the things that Kimberly was talking about, the basketball courts and the tennis courts and the gyms and after school programs or even before school programs, when you don't have those in place, you have children that have nothing to do. And so they don't have anything to do at home. So what do? They go out in the streets, hang out, do what they do. And a lot of times these kids are not doing anything wrong. They just don't, have anything, else to do but jump on the Max and ride around, go hang out at different areas, different parks and things like that, and walk around at the mall, but sometimes become victimized simply because they're just trying to find something to do. And I think we need more community empowerment programs because we can't police this thing away. We can investigate as many gun crimes as possible. I know there's 30, sometimes 40, even 50 gun shells at the scene of a crime, but it's something that can't be policed away. It's something that the community have to be empowered to do, to come together and take a stand and say, these are the things that we actually need in our community. We really do. We need more funding. We need activities for our kids to do. We need preventive services. We need deterrence to embolden our community and embolden our kids to do something better than what we've seen so far.
I've said to people that by the time my office is involved, we've already failed. Once the shell casings are on the ground, our options become even more limited in terms of what we can do. And we're chasing the harm instead of getting out in front of it. Erica, let me just bring your voice into this. What else do you have to add in this? what I'm seeing is that this is there's not a one size fits all answer to this. And it's a complex problem. And so I'm wondering what other things do you see? Do you see other rules or other pieces of the puzzle that are necessary to give people hope, help heal trauma? What kinds of things as a survivor, what types of resources do you wish were there for you and your family?
I would like resources as far as follow up. Just to, a couple months or whatever after a family has lost a loved one, just for someone just to say, hey, how are you doing? What services do you need? Because at the end of the day, my kids struggle. My son's kids struggle, my grandkids. I have a house of grandkids for my son that I have to explain to. My kids are older when my second son was taken. So now they're older, but they've been to 2 funerals. I don't know what else to do as far as what we can do. I mean, we just have to just get to these kids. We need help in any community, all communities. We just have to just come together. I mean, I don't know a solution. I don't know an answer, but I know something will give one day. We just have to just keep our fingers crossed.
Kimberly, I'll take that to you next. And I wonder, I think we've all been part of where we are right now. We're almost acclimated to the situation that we're in. And part of that's the pandemic. And I wonder if you could just say a few words. I mean, we've seen this surging violence across the country. It's hit Portland hard. It's hitting other cities hard. And the common thread is the pandemic. What else would you say about that and what that has kind of shown us, if any lessons you derive from seeing some of those social safety nets kind of fray?
Well, I gotta be honest with you. When I've gone out on a call, that call had nothing to do with the pandemic. The violence that I have seen in terms of a direct impact of the pandemic, I saw a decision being made. A decision was made, an inanimate object was used, and life was thereby impacted. That's what I've seen. Now we can roll back and we can go into socioeconomic impacts. We can go into mental health impacts. All of these are very real things. And so, yes, have we lived within a pandemic? Yes, we have. Yes, we have. But we have had other external things that came along with the pandemic. We had law enforcement resources that were redirected in other ways. We've had a significant amount of, obviously our kids have been out of school. That's true, but these are not school shootings that we're discussing. These are people who are walking, are driving, are just standing around in a parking lot, hanging out, are going to go pick up food. These are normal everyday activities. And so you mentioned a little bit ago about, almost kind of a numbing, because we keep hearing about these, shooting here, shooting there. We should never become numb to the loss of life. We should never, and let's remove the word trauma for a second. What is trauma? Trauma is an injury. There has been injury when there is trauma. And so we've taken the word, there's a trauma unit in a hospital, right? And they will triage you. We've taken a word and now we've laid that over the very real injury that is happening within communities at a disproportionate rate. Let's be very clear. There's a disproportionate rate by which folks of color are being injured, and the access to supports or resources by which to not only survive, but thrive beyond the injury is inequitable. That is what we are talking about. So we have mental injury to folks. We have physical injury to folks. We have emotional injury to folks. That is what is happening. So how will we respond? Will we respond like we did with the pandemic? Will we respond like we do if we learn that somebody is gravely ill and we want to wrap around them and do everything we can? So are our children important enough in our society, in our communities, to reach out and wrap around them and their families that are attached to them to support and say, what can we do? How can we help? This is what we have. When I'm asking you that question, let me tell you what I've got. Do any of these things that I have mean anything to you? Are they meaningful? What would be meaningful? How could I support you better? How we are coming upon summer. Youth should be getting ready to go to work. Everybody's got to get their summer job on. I remember, former Commissioner Loretta Schmidt, that was her big thing. Let's get these kids learning. Let's get them learning about, what it means to go to work, prepping for work, What about teaching kids about youth and families about becoming entrepreneurs? There are things that we can do. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the very things that I am saying in other communities, it is normal. It is like breathing. So we don't have equitable access. And my community should not get the crumbs from the table. Period.
Elmer, I'm going to let you go. Try to follow Kimberly if you can. Thank you, Kimberly.
Tough one to follow, let me tell you. She's something else. I think a lot of times our youth are dehumanized based upon media and how our children are portrayed through the media and through the streets. And oftentimes we look past our children as less than, and they can't be motivated enough to go out and get these summer jobs and work the summer works jobs that Loretta Smith was so great at actually doing. I really don't know what to say past what Kimberly has already said, but the thriving beyond injury, our community is injured. We've been injured for a long time, and we need some type of resources to help us heal. We have to heal holistically as opposed to individually. And we have to come together, not only wrap our arms around our children, but wrap our arms around each other. And to once again show that love. I believe us being moved out of our communities of color and spread out so thin into so many different segments of the community, out of what we knew, took a sense of family away from our communities of color, because whether or not we had drugs or gangs or gun violence or anything like that in our community, we're still a community. We could still go outside and knock on doors, or there were still people coming out on porches and making sure that the children next door were safe and that they were doing what they were supposed to. And we get beat by the next door neighbor, and go home and get beat by our mother and father for not doing the right thing. And so we have a loss of community in that sense. And so I think that community resources, us coming together as a family again, and trying to figure out how we can rebuild our community, even though we're not, living next door to one another like we used to. And so I'm excited. I'm hoping that whatever this program is, it does help assist us with what we need to do, but funding resources are extremely important for us to be able to do that.
Elmer, that's a good place to lead into. I'm going to ask you all, first of all, I hope people are watching. I hope people are listening to this conversation because I really appreciate all of you sharing your lived experiences, your wisdom. And I think people need to hear that. And I want now to pivot to kind of, Elmer, where you were leaving us off, which is, what's your wish list? If you were sitting on city council, or you're at the county commission, or you're at the state, or you're the president of the United States, what's your wish list for what we need? I think we've touched on a lot of these things, but I just want to be explicit for people that are listening to this conversation. Erica, I'll start off with you. What's your wish list of what you see? We need this. This is what we need specifically. This is what I'd like to see happen.
Well, I'm just going to say, like he said, I just want more programs for our youth. I have teenage kids myself and teenage grandkids. And, like he said, when there's nothing to do, kids find things to do that they don't have any business doing. We need to keep these kids and people just busy. But how do we do that? You got the community centers that are closed. You've got, everything that was available is not available. So if we're going to try it again, I just hope that it's we can throw like a wishing well. We can just make a wish and it happens. And I just hope that it works because our youth need it. Our communities need it. Like Kimberly said, we're past hurting. We're traumatized now. And we just need resources that work this time. And I hope that they do work.
Thank you. Kimberly, so the same question to you. And I know we've touched on this, but I want to put a fine point on it. Tell people what we need. What's your wish list?
So I definitely need my community-based organizations well-funded, who are putting boots on the ground and are engaging very specifically with our youth. And we have the organizations and they have people. What they haven't had is steady funding. And as I mentioned before, we have to stop toggling the funding back and forth with them. Stop that. It's not working. It is not working. So we need that type of funding. We need very specifically, as Ms. Erica just said, we need to have things that youth can become engaged in. So let's think outside the box. If we can't do X, then let's see if we can do Y. Let's not be stuck about the pandemic. We are resilient people. I say give folks some leeway, give CBOs some elbow room to be creative. So if they're having to apply to your office for grants or any place else for grants, give them elbow room. They know the folks that they're working with directly. Give them some elbow room and let them fly out some programming. I don't even like to call it programming. Let them fly out some engagement opportunities and see how it works. Whether it's, sports focused or arts focused or spoken word focused, or hey, we're just gathering around a picnic table and we're going to break bread. Let them do it. Let them do their work the way that they need to do their work, and let them report it back out the way they need to report it back out. Sometimes we're so busy looking for the quantitative that we totally slide over the qualitative. And those are the pieces that are really the nuts and bolts and the glue that was holding all of that quantitative business together to begin with. And the other thing is like I said earlier, stop seeing my community as broken. We're hurt. We've been wounded. We don't need a fix. We need to have what everyone else had to begin with. And we've never had that. So that's a piece. We start there. Dr. King said, how do you ask somebody to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but yet they have no boots? So I'm going to leave that messaging out there. If I don't got a slip up, then I can't put anything on my foot, correct? So don't ask people to do something that they're not able to do because they haven't ever had the resource by which to do it. And it's no differently. We held a meeting here at 2:00 in the afternoon. Most folks are actually working. And if they're not working at home, they're working away from home at this hour. If we're inviting community to truly have a meaningful conversation and be part of the conversation, then we need to find out when community wants to meet. If you really want to engage with me, then you develop that relationship with me to find out what's good for me and you, so that we can both come to the table. That's what makes it more meaningful. We need youth voices. We need youth educated voices. We also need to know what is happening in our city. I made a comment to somebody before, and I've taken this away from Trillium Family Services. We need to be very careful if we are making decisions for and to and upon community and not with community. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity as well.
Lift up a friend of mine who was on Cloud the other day, Lakiana Drury, gave an interview from his perspective, and he talked about directly funding, direct payments to youth through youth program. And Kimberly, as you were talking and think out of the box, I just thought, he's exactly talking about addressing a need, giving people hope and opportunity that other people have and have had and generationally have had, that a lot of youth that we're seeing involved in gun violence do not and have never. Elmer, same to you, same question. What's your wish list?
Wish list resources, number one, for or support groups for victims of crimes and for their families. I would love to see that. I had no idea that Erica lost 2 of her babies, which is devastating enough. But to have a group of women and men who have lost children to come together, or family members to come together and bounce off one another ideas to encourage one another through these trials and tribulations that we're going through. Like Kimberly said, CBO is well funded, that we get more people working under organizations that are already doing the work. School resources is a big thing. I can remember having assemblies, and we're talking about anti-violence and things like that. Get kids encouraged and get kids involved at younger ages. I remember the officer friendlies that used to come to the school when we were young to build relationships with younger people and younger children, so people to actually go in and actually talk to children about law enforcement side, and to build those relationships, because a lot of relationships can be built through their children. And once the officer build a relationship with the younger people, I think a lot of the school resource officers were doing that. Like Chuck Lavelle, who happens to be the chief now. He is one of the best, working over at Jeff and working over at POIC, working with us and building the trust with the students. They were respectful of him and he was respectful of them. Community policing, police officers getting out of their vehicles, not necessarily in uniform, in some basketball shorts and a t-shirt, walking up on the court at Peninsula Park and play basketball with children and things like that, and build relationships that way. And then the community empowerment piece. I can remember being called out, as a crisis responder, out to shootings, but the next day I would go and knock on, neighboring doors and things like that, just to find out how community members felt about their safety and things like that. So if we can reach out to the community, I think it's going to take the whole community to actually help out with the situation that we're going through. Once again, the police can't police it away. We have to come together as a community. We have to throw resources behind it. And until we do that, I don't think it'd be fixed.
What your experience, Elmer, talking about neighbors checking on neighbors in community, getting involved just at that level, I think is a really powerful idea and just a way to take care of each other.
Right. I think we've gotten away from that, taking care of one another and looking out for one another. And it's sad. It's the climate that we live in, that people, are sadly enough thinking about themselves and their safety and not being considered the person next door to them anymore. People, live right next door to people and don't know their names or don't look out for one another like we used to. And it's sad. And I wish we can get back to that.
I went and met with a neighborhood association the other day that were doing outreach to houseless folks. And one of the things that they said to me is, we don't need to just sit here and say, oh, we need this, we need that. We want to engage, but we do need we just need to be coordinated. We need to understand how we can engage. We have so many good people in our community that are willing to step up, and we have that power. There's not that, I guess, maybe the call to civic, interaction that maybe there used to be. We've kind of lost looking out for each other. So I appreciate, what you're saying. And I think, maybe there's opportunities with the neighborhood associations, some of this.
Yeah, a lot of us don't, and a lot of us don't have neighborhood associations. And a lot of people just don't know how. There are some people that may have the heart to do it and the drive to do it, but just don't know how to put things together like that. So that would be another resource, is to have an organizer who's able to go around and put together things like that. Kimberly is good at things like that.
And it kind of feeds into the conversation that we were just having. But the question was, how can you make sure that our social safety nets are available and stay available? And I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit, how we've gone, defund this, chase that, then we move back to funding this. And, how do we stop lurching social safety nets stay available?
You're asking me that question, sir? I've got
Yeah,
microphone.
sorry.
I'm hearing some microphone stuff in the background, so you were toggling in and out on me.
Oh, apologies. Yes, Kimberly, what's your thoughts on the social safety net?
So I think I've said multiple times that I see as having a regional issue or challenge that requires a regional response. I've said it also that, we need to airdrop resources in the same way in our response to the pandemic. That is going to be something that's key. And also that means that we also have to reach out to one another as, at our local city government levels. Portland cannot silo itself away from Gresham. There is no wall that's preventing violence from hopping over 162nd. Okay. Pastor Elmer, we know, we responded to, unfortunately, in that area, and it's considered Portland. However, we're blocks away from Gresham. And also our friends over here to the north, Southwest Washington, we need to reach out and hold hands there. We need to reach, Salem's having their own uptick in violence. If anybody's paying attention to the minuteness of that it hits the news, but it is happening. And it's happening enough that it's caught my attention. I'm like, well, wait a minute, what's going on in Salem? We as a region collectively must communicate with one another about what's happening and what is the response, looking for trends, of course. I mean, hello, we have the I-5 corridor. Do we have any trends that we need to pay attention to? Do we have a drug trafficking, human trafficking, and gun trafficking issue? We need to address that. That's a trifecta right there, right? So all of those things to create the safety net, you have the one part, which is let's address our challenges, but we need to do so in a collective way. And on the other side of that, let's address our challenges, which also means, hey, how can we support? We also know that there are just going to be those folks who just got to go see if the stove is really hot. Do they really believe that the coffee is hot when it comes out of that cup? We have to legislate that the coffee is hot and put that on top of the lid. There's going to be those folks, but there's also the folks that are sitting right here in the middle, where having the opportunities, and we keep claiming them as opportunities and resources. And I say these are normal things in other communities and in other neighborhoods. Well, let's get normalcy here. North Portland, Northeast Portland, Southeast Portland, East County, Gresham, Beaverton. Let's do it. Let's make that happen. Let's make that happen.
I'm gonna end there. That's the way to end. That's a call to action. Let's make that happen. I want to thank my guests. Thank you all so much, Elmer, Kimberly, and Erica, for joining me for this conversation. So much wisdom, and I really appreciate our collaboration. And let's keep the conversation going. And Kimberly, as you say, let's figure out when the community needs to meet. Let's meet people where they're at. Let's make sure that we keep this dialogue going. Because it's too important to let go. So, Kimberly, thank you for the call to action. Everybody, let's make it happen. Thank you for joining us today, and let's continue and keep this up.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.